A new manager at the company pushed an elderly worker, causing him to fall to his knees on the sidewalk, but later discovered something that left him trembling. The new manager, with a heart as cold as ice, cruelly fired an elderly employee who had been with the company since its inception, showing not the slightest trace of compassion. The ruthless manager shoved him toward the exit as the elderly man's cries of protest echoed in the lobby. "Please, sir, I dedicated my life to this company," the elderly man pleaded, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm asking for just a little compassion." "Compassion? Don't make me laugh," the manager replied with disdain. "Your years here don't matter anymore. You're just a burden." With each push, the elderly man lost a bit of his dignity, and his belongings, accumulated over decades of service, scattered across the floor like silent witnesses to the cruelty. The final act occurred on the sidewalk, where the elderly man, with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes, gathered his few possessions under the manager's mocking gaze. "Look at how you've ended up, you useless old man," the manager sneered with a malicious smile. "I told you this day would come." The elderly man, his voice breaking, murmured, "I never thought it would be like this after all I've done." The ruthless manager relished every moment of the humiliation, but what he would soon discover among the elderly man's belongings would leave everyone stunned. Workers were surprised and perhaps even devastated themselves. Join me in learning about the story of Carlos, a hard-working man who dedicated all his years to a company that ultimately repaid him in the worst way possible when he was no longer useful. Carlos was an elderly man who had worked at the textile company from a young age, alongside other employees, helping the company to prosper. His dedication was unmatched, and he was beloved by everyone. There wasn't a single role in the company that he didn't know perfectly well, as he was always actively assisting in all areas, from fabric production to the final packaging of the products. His presence was constant, a paternal figure who offered support and wisdom to his colleagues. On the other hand, the company had, since its inception, a manager who, from his position of power, oversaw the staff. This manager was known for his distant and authoritarian attitude, rarely interacting with the employees beyond giving orders. However, everyone knew that the true owner of the company never showed up at the factory. Even the longest-serving employees had never met him personally. This mystery about the owner became a frequent topic of speculation and gossip among the employees during breaks. Despite the owner's absence, the company continued to thrive, and they attributed that success to Carlos's tireless efforts. He didn't just perform his duties, he went above and beyond by offering solutions to problems, training new employees, and ensuring that every detail was perfect. His experience and dedication made him an essential part of the company's operations. However, the general manager, Mr. Sebastian, was always a kind and attentive leader who cared about the needs of his employees. Sebastian had been in charge of the company for many years and knew Carlos very well. Carlos was a man with good ideas, and Sebastian often consulted him about upcoming business ventures. Carlos's vision for new acquisitions was something Sebastian deeply admired. Together, they planned new strategies, and on one occasion, Carlos saved the company from a potential disaster. This act of insight and loyalty earned Sebastian's complete trust in Carlos, and from that point on, they developed a strong friendship. Sebastian valued Carlos not only as an employee, but also as a friend. At a barbecue at Sebastian's house, the laughter and conversations flowed freely. "Carlos, do you remember that investment proposal we almost accepted?" Sebastian asked while grilling some meat. "How could I forget?" Carlos replied, laughing. "It's a good thing we reviewed those details before making a decision." "My wife still thanks me for avoiding that disaster," Sebastian said, nodding toward his wife Laura, who was nearby. While talking with Carlos's wife Anna by the pool, Carlos remarked, It was a team effort, raising his glass. Here's to many more good decisions. Cheers, Sebastian responded, clinking his glass with Carlos's. The children played together, running around the garden, while their wives chatted and laughed. The friendship between Carlos and Sebastian extended to their families as well, creating a bond that went beyond the professional realm. Sebastian, I've always valued your advice and your friendship, Carlos said, looking at his friend with sincerity. We didn't just build a strong company, we created a true community, and that's something I'm very proud of. Sebastian smiled and replied, having you and your family close was one of the best decisions of my life. The afternoon continued with stories and plans for the future, further strengthening a friendship that would undoubtedly continue to grow over time. As the years passed, Sebastian, due to his advanced age, fell ill and with a heavy heart decided to retire from his position as manager to enjoy a quieter life with his wife. This event led the unknown owner of the company to select a new representative. A younger man, full of energy, was recommended to lead the company into a new, more modernized era with greater profits. His name was Lorenzo, a man who from the very beginning, from the moment Lorenzo set foot in the company, he displayed an air of superiority. He gave orders with disdain and seemed devoid of any compassion, showing no understanding for any reason to miss work or arrive late. His first days at the company were a shock to all the employees, who had grown accustomed to Sebastian's kind and understanding leadership. I want the sales reports on my desk by 8 sharp, Lorenzo demanded, without even making eye contact with the employees. But sir, some of the data hasn't been fully compiled yet, Carlos tried to explain. I don't want excuses, Lorenzo interrupted coldly. If you can't handle something so simple, maybe you don't belong here. The atmosphere in the company grew tense. Employees who once felt valued and respected now worked under a cloud of fear and anxiety. The camaraderie that Sebastian had cultivated over many years seemed to vanish under Lorenzo's new management. One day, after an especially difficult day, Carlos found himself reflecting on the drastic changes in the company. He remembered Sebastian's wise words. Carlos, never forget that people are the true driving force of this company, Sebastian had once told him. Without them, we are nothing. Determined to preserve that legacy, Carlos gathered a group of trusted colleagues and he proposed a meeting outside of work hours. We can't let this new manager destroy what we worked so hard to build, Carlos said with determination. We need to find a way to adapt while still remembering and honoring the values Sebastian taught us. Unfortunately, many employees began to resign due to the mistreatment by the new manager, Lorenzo, and the company's profits plummeted. Lorenzo often took money from the main cash register to spend on parties with friends, buy extravagant gifts for his lovers, and even go on luxurious trips. His irresponsible and wasteful behavior soon affected the financial stability of the company. The remaining employees who had once felt valued under Sebastian's leadership were now demotivated and distressed. The work atmosphere became unbearable. Lorenzo not only diverted company funds, but also severely neglected his responsibilities. He frequently arrived late, often missed work, and when he was present, his attitude was authoritarian and abusive. This situation especially impacted Carlos, who was the oldest of all the employees. Due to his advanced age, he could no longer perform tasks as quickly as before. However, the manager couldn't find a reason to fire him because, despite his slower pace, Carlos always completed his work. Carlos consistently met the company's targets, but as time passed, Lorenzo, the supervisor, assigned him increasingly difficult tasks whenever he could, as if trying to break the old worker's spirit. Noticing the boss's hostile attitude, the other employees banded together in solidarity with Carlos. They helped him lift heavy objects, operate complicated machinery, and even handled the fabric cutting. Each person contributed in some way to ensure that Carlos could continue his work without risking his health. They didn't want the elderly man, who was like a grandfather to many of them, to end up on the street because of a malicious man who seemed to take pleasure in his suffering. The kindness and camaraderie among the workers made Carlos feel supported and valued despite the challenges he faced daily. Realizing he couldn't fire Carlos for incompetence, Lorenzo came up with another idea. One day, he organized a small party in the office to celebrate Mr. Carlos's 30 years of service. He bought a large cake and various snacks. As everyone ate and drank, Lorenzo made an announcement. In his speech, he expressed gratitude for Carlos's many years of hard work, but mentioned that he would miss Carlos, since that very afternoon would be his last day as an employee, as he would be retiring. The elderly man, who had been listening attentively, was stunned by the news. After emerging from his state of shock, Carlos faced Lorenzo and firmly said, "I'm not retiring, Lorenzo. I love my job, and I'm not leaving as long as I still have strength in my body." Lorenzo's expression changed entirely. The fake smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure anger. In a fit of rage, he threw his glass, shattering it to pieces, and yelled at the elderly man, "You're just a leech who took advantage of the previous manager's naivety, but that's not going to happen anymore." The office fell into a tense silence, broken only by the crunch of glass under the feet of those present. The employees who had been enjoying the celebration moments earlier now looked on with worry and disbelief. Despite his racing heart and trembling hands, Carlos held his ground. "Lorenzo, you have no right to speak to me that way," Carlos said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've dedicated 30 years of my life to this company, and I did it with pride and dedication. You can't just decide my future without consulting me. I'm the manager now, and I'll do what I see fit for this company," Lorenzo retorted, his face red with anger. "And you, old man, no longer have a place here. It's time for you to step aside and let the younger, more capable ones take over." Lorenzo then walked over to Carlos's cubicle, grabbed his few belongings and tossed them into a bag. Trash, with a gesture of disdain, Lorenzo ordered the security guards to remove him. The elderly man, stunned and unable to fully grasp the brutality of the moment, was dragged out of the building. As he was pushed out, he stumbled and fell to his knees on the sidewalk, his belongings thrown carelessly beside him as if they held no value. Passers-by watched in shock and pity as the old man with trembling hands tried to gather his things. His eyes, filled with sorrow and humiliation, mirrored the cruelty of what had just happened. The manager, stepping out of the building, paused before slamming the door in Carlos's face and coldly remarked, "Don't ever come back here. A weak old man has no use for us anymore." His words hung in the air, laden with contempt and disdain. Carlos remained kneeling on the pavement, trying to compose himself as tears welled up in his eyes. That afternoon, the manager returned to his office, a satisfied smirk on his face, and boasted about his achievement in getting rid of the old man. He sat back in his leather chair, lit a cigarette, and began mocking Carlos openly in front of his closest colleagues. "Did you see that old man's face?" he laughed. "He thought he was worth something. It's unbelievable how these people cling to the past." His colleagues, though uncomfortable, joined in the laughter, too afraid to show disapproval. The office, once a place of camaraderie and respect, had become a cold and hostile environment. Under Sebastian's leadership, the office had become a toxic and hostile environment. Meanwhile, the elderly man slowly made his way away from the building, his back hunched and spirit broken. Each step was painful, not only from the fall, but also from the emotional blow he had endured. That evening, when Carlos arrived home, he recounted the events to his wife, Anna. Indignant over the new manager's cruelty, Anna exclaimed, This is unacceptable, Carlos. We need to speak with Sebastian. He has always been fair and will know what to do. We must inform the company owners about what's happening. Carlos, concerned about his former boss and friend's health, shook his head. I don't want to trouble Sebastian, Anna. You know he is very ill. I don't want to burden him with these problems. Still furious, Anna tried to persuade him. Sebastian has always cared about all of you. I'm sure he would want to know what's happening. We can't let this man ruin everything he built. Despite her husband's reluctance, Anna decided to act swiftly. She reached out to Laura, Sebastian's wife, seeking support. Laura, who had witnessed her husband's hard work in building the company, listened attentively to Anna's account. Laura, this situation cannot continue, Anna said desperately. Lorenzo is destroying everything Sebastian worked so hard to create. The employees are being mistreated, and Lorenzo is embezzling money from the company. We can't just stand by and do nothing, Anna said urgently. Laura, visibly affected by the news, responded with resolve. You're right, Anna. This cannot go on. I will talk to Sebastian and see what we can do. I won't let my husband's legacy be destroyed by someone like him. Concerned for Sebastian's health, but recognizing the severity of the situation, Laura decided to inform him. Although weakened, Sebastian felt outraged and determined to act. I can't allow this to continue, Sebastian said, his voice weak but resolute. I will contact the company owners and tell them everything that's happening. I won't let my work and the well-being of my former employees be destroyed. With Laura and Anna's help, Sebastian drafted a detailed letter outlining all of Lorenzo's abuses and embezzlement. The letter was sent to the company's owners, who, alarmed by the seriousness of the accusations, decided to take immediate action. The next morning, Lorenzo arrived at his office to find a woman surrounded by uniformed men packing up his belongings into boxes. Furious at the sight, he confronted the woman, demanding to know who she thought she was to handle his things without permission. She approached him and firmly explained that she was a lawyer representing the company's owner and that Lorenzo was being investigated for the alleged embezzlement. Thousands of dollars. Surprised and enraged, Lorenzo tried to defend himself, but just then, the elderly man he had expelled the day before entered the office. However, he was no longer dressed in the old clothes Lorenzo was used to. Instead, he wore a very expensive-looking suit. The elderly man, now with an imposing stance and a stern expression, made it clear that things were not as Lorenzo had thought, increasing the tension and mystery of the situation. Seeing him, the manager erupted in fury and attempted to eject him from the premises once more. But one of the security guards quickly intervened and prevented him from doing so. The elderly man, with a calmness that contrasted with the tension of the moment, approached and began to speak in a measured tone. "You can't be here," the manager shouted, his eyes blazing with anger. "Who do you think you are?" The elderly man looked at him with a mix of sadness and disappointment before responding. "I am the one who has always been at the helm of this company since my dear friend Sebastian stopped working here," he said firmly. "For years, I worked side by side with our employees, driving the business forward as a dedicated worker who helped everything run smoothly." The manager stared at him in disbelief, unable to find words. The elderly man continued in a calm and controlled voice. "I saw this company thrive thanks to the collective effort of everyone here. However, due to my advanced age, I decided it was time to step down and hand over the reins to someone else. That's why I hired you, thinking you could continue our work." The manager interrupted with a tone of surprise and disdain. "Hire me for what? I'm the manager. I don't need to be supervised." The elderly man nodded slowly. "I hired a new manager whom I intended to monitor discreetly to ensure that the company's legacy was preserved. But I made a grave mistake by hiring someone as arrogant as you. who not only shows a lack of concern for the well-being of the employees, but also spent months embezzling from the company. The manager's face flushed red with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "That's a lie," he exclaimed. "You have no evidence." The elderly man took an envelope from the inside pocket of his coat and handed it to the manager. "Here are all the necessary proofs, documentation, records, employee testimonies. Everything is here. I didn't make this decision lightly." The manager took the envelope with trembling hands, seething with rage. "This is not over," he shouted, breaking the tense silence of the room. The elderly man looked at him with unwavering calm. "You are mistaken," he said softly but firmly. "This is over. Not only have you betrayed this company, but you've also let down everyone who trusted you. Now you will face the consequences of your actions." Without another word, the elderly man. The manager dropped the envelope and exited the room, his tense figure disappearing through the door. The elderly man turned to the security team and instructed them to prevent the manager from leaving as the police were on their way. He then addressed the employees who had witnessed the scene. "Let's get back to work, everyone," he said with a weary smile. "There's still much to be done, and the company needs all of us more than ever." The employees nodded, some with tears in their eyes, as they returned to their positions. Despite the gravity of the situation, the elderly man walked with determination, committed to moving forward for the sake of the company he had built with such effort. The corrupt manager, unable to find any words, was handcuffed and escorted out of the building by the police. The scene unfolded before the eyes of all, leaving an indelible mark on the employee's memories. He was taken to prison, and it was soon proven that he was guilty of multiple charges of embezzlement and fraud. Consequently, he was sentenced to a long term behind bars, where he had ample time to reflect on his actions and their repercussions. With the corrupt manager out of the way, Carlos took the reins of the business once again with renewed determination. His friend Sebastian, who had held the manager's position for many years before retiring, played a crucial role in this process, offering his wise advice and support. With the experience shared by Sebastian, Carlos was able to grasp the best approach to managing the crisis that had been left behind. Under Carlos's leadership, the company began to thrive once again, quickly regaining the trust of both clients and employees. Known for his integrity and dedication, Carlos earned the respect and affection of everyone who worked with him. Despite his leadership role, he never stopped working alongside his team. He was often seen on the factory floor, overseeing processes, engaging with employees, and actively participating in daily tasks. His consistent presence and willingness to listen and assist fostered a positive and welcoming work environment. Employees deeply valued Carlos's humility and commitment, knowing they could rely on him at any time. This mutual trust led to exceptional productivity and loyalty. Under his guidance, the company not only restored its financial stability, but also experienced significant growth. Carlos continued to work diligently until his final days, never fully retiring and always finding ways to contribute and support his team. His legacy endured well beyond his lifetime, and the company he helped build continued to flourish, inspired by the values and ethics he embodied. Enriched by Sebastian's friendship and guidance, he became a shining example of leadership and dedication, remembered and celebrated by future generations. Thus, remember that the position we hold holds no value if we do not grow as individuals. The true measure of success is not found in titles or positions, but in how we treat others and how we develop as human beings. The best way to succeed in all areas of life is by being humble and treating those around us with kindness. It's easy to forget that behind every achievement are people who support us and help us grow. Dear friends, thank you for joining us once again in this story filled with lessons and reflections. We hope these words resonate in your hearts and inspire you to become better each day. A warm embrace to everyone, And remember that we will always be here to share more reflections and inspiring stories. May God bless you and see you in the next video.